right.
Okay.
Was it a good lunch? All right. Did anyone not get lunch? You didn't get lunch?
I'm eating the cookies, sir. Does that count?
I'm concerned.
I'm good.
Is there something we can do?
No, sir. I've got coffee. That's all I need.
So coffee is your lunch with a cookie. All right. Okay. Awesome. Well, we're excited to be here. Do y'all mind if we sit? Well, they told us that we had to sit in these chairs. So, and it's very hard for Chief and I to talk and sit at the same time. But we're going to give this a try.
I'm going to have to hold my legs down.
So we're really here to talk about HCNext 2.0, and these are our lines of effort. And so we're going to kind of give you the overview that we're giving everyone on the road. I recently sat with General Brown and walked through not just our 3 LOEs, but really talked about the spiritual fitness initiatives and how we're moving out, how we're rebuilding readiness, and that important piece in fortifying the warfighter and talking about our HC culture. So you heard him allude to some broad strokes regarding our strategic plan, and that's because he just listened to that and affirmed the direction that we are headed. So what we're about to walk into or walk you through is HCNext 2.0. Now, this is not my strategic plan. In fact, at the last HC Council, the HC Council members stood in unison 100% in affirmation of HCNext 2.0. So this is in our governance structure, the HC Council has approved this moving forward. So now we want to ensure that you not only hear it and understand it, but embrace it and personalize it for where you serve and where you lead. Now, the next part of that is on Thursday, I believe it was Chaplain Wharf that sent out some playbooks, LOE playbooks, lines of effort playbooks. Does anybody remember getting an email from Chaplain Wharf? Okay, I see that hand. Is there another? Yes, I see that hand. And there's another. And there's another. That's good. So that will be a reference point. So tomorrow afternoon as we go into breakout sessions and then an additional breakout on Thursday to talk about LOEs from a MAGCOM, FieldCom, down to installation level implementation and how to do that. So one of the things that I remember from HC Next is there was a lot there, and everyone remembers LOE number 2, rebluing
Business practices.
That's it. Everybody remember rebluing something, but couldn't remember much of anything else. It's one thing to have the words, it's the what. It's another thing to have the how, but we started with the why we needed to do this, and that was the emphasis from this morning. For a time such as this, we are on the clock, and there is a lot that we have been called to do. Our 3 senior leaders, and we heard from CMSgt Bass, it is very critical the timing that we're in right now. So what we'd like to do is walk through this plan with the LOEs, and then we would like to go to Q&A. So with that, I think the next slide, Chief, over to you.
Hey, I think this is us on this slide. If you haven't met us, we'll be right out in the lobby. Really want to talk about your role in communicating and embracing the lines of effort of HCNext 2.0. And so when we talk about casting the vision like we did earlier this morning, And Chaplain Kitchens just shared that our HC Council stood in unison and said, we're lockstep with this. And then Chaplain Kitchens and I go, and we travel around and we get the opportunity to brief our basic chaplain grads. We just were at Robbins with our chaplain candidates. When we get the chance at our Religious Affairs Apprentice course, we're there, we're talking through this, we're talking with this at the base. So here it is at your HC Council level. Here it is at the brand new, new future of the Chaplain Corps. Y'all are in a critical piece in the middle of your spheres of influence to communicate this and breathe life into it. It is not enough for us to say it everywhere we go. We desperately need your help. Okay, so that's the call to action where we need you. Next slide. So we're about building tomorrow's Chaplain Corps today. Just like we're talking about getting ready for tomorrow's fight today. And this is how we're going to do that. Next slide. Thanks. If you can build it out, that'd be great. So we want to make sure that you're tracking that we have more than 2 core capabilities, right? And so when we do talk and have the great opportunity to speak with some of our newest Chaplain Corps members, we'll say, how many core capabilities are there? And they'll say, we know that advising leadership is one, and then the other, spiritual care, that's it, right? And we're like, well, again, in the same vein of rebluing business practice, we recognize that you understand our history. So, good job on the history lesson, but there's intentionality about breaking out spiritual care into religious accommodation and spiritual fitness. And so as we walk through coming out of the COVID pandemic, we got a lot of free press for religious accommodations. However, that is not solely what religious accommodations are. The very existence of the Chaplain Corps came about for providing for worship, liturgies, rites, sacraments, and religious education and community and fellowship, and us being able to walk alongside our military members and provide for their religious accommodation needs. And then there is a portion of that goes into exceptions of policy for when your service does not align with what current policy is, and we don't want to limit that in any way. And so there's intentionality about breaking out spiritual care to include why the Chaplain Corps exists and walking in confidence in we provide for the religious needs of our airmen, guardians, and families. And then we will break into spiritual fitness all the more and what that entails. It's not the junk drawer of spiritual care. If it's not advising leadership, just put it in spiritual care and it'll be fine. There's intentionality behind spiritual fitness. And you'll see on the slides the mission, the vision, the motto. I love to learn. I'm one of those people that likes to take tests. Y'all can pray for me later. I enjoy that. And I love a question that's got the answer in the question. And so when you look at our mission, you can kind of combine both the motto and the vision into that. What is our role? To inspire readiness. You see that from the motto. And then how do we do that? We are inspiring readiness for our airmen, our guardians, and our families through our core capabilities: religious accommodation, spiritual fitness, and advising leadership. So that helps me remember it. If that helps you remember it, look to the answer is in the question. Next slide, please.
All right, so how do we quick care? And I believe there's one more click because we want to give you, and one more. This is just really the overview of our 3 LOEs: fortify warfighter readiness, reimage HC culture, and rebuild HC readiness. Next slide. All right, let me talk about LOE number 1. So how do we fortify warfighter readiness? And that is ensuring that our airmen, guardians, and families are spiritually prepared for personal and professional success. We do this through religious accommodation and services. That's what Chief was just outlining. It is those worship liturgies, rites, sacraments, religious education, teachings, instruction, fellowship, caring. Those are Title 10 responsibilities that we are to embrace. Now, there is a circulated story that those are not important anymore, that the only thing important is unit engagement. And embedding in the units is what we're doing totally. So I have used multiple media means to communicate it, and let me communicate it one more time. It's not either or, it's both and. We have a Title 10 responsibility, and we have a unit engagement responsibility to meet the intent of religious accommodation and services, plus the exception to policies. So I hope that is crystal clear. However, as we move into post-COVID, one of the questions, there are several questions at the strategic level being asked. And do you have to continue doing religious services? Well, we have a Title 10 responsibility. Ecclesiastical endorsers place a responsibility, but there's a question about, well, can't you just go outside the wire? Can't you go off base and do that? Well, there is a readiness aspect to religious services. In other words, whether we're at home or abroad, fortifying the warfighter is going to happen in multiple religious service ways. So we must keep our skills sharp and crisp, and we also must provide for the opportunities for the warfighter and family to be religiously, spiritually prepared. So religious service and religious accommodation is a part of that. So what do we talk about when we say spiritual fitness? You're going to hear more about some of these as the week goes along. But the number one is think about the spirit of the warfighter. This morning you heard our senior leaders talking about, it's really what they were saying is, how do we ensure folks are spiritually prepared? What is the spirit of the warfighter? I think of the people of Ukraine. They embody the spirit of the warfighter. As I shared with General Brown, if China is before us, China does not have a religion that they can mirror image against us. So therefore, they're searching, they're asking, what is a chaplain? What is a chaplain corps college so that they can duplicate, and it's something they can't duplicate. And I believe that is a force multiplier for us, and that is a mirror image that cannot be duplicated. And so we have something that the enemy does not. So by emphasizing that importance with the spiritual service and the spiritual fitness, religious service, spiritual fitness together, we actually fortify the warfighter and family. So that spirit of the warfighter is one. The strong bond courses actually are going to help fortify the warfighter and family, whether it's in unit, whether it's in community setting, it doesn't matter. But it's really how do we organize, train, and equip our folks in these areas. So Hope Initiative, this is the White Ropes program being operationalized. And you're going to hear more about that in a presentation. I'm very excited about this. Our senior leaders are. They're asking about it. They want to know, how many beta tests do you have going on? How is it going? What have you learned from that? How is this going to work? In embedding resources in units that are attached to us, that are trained and organized. Very exciting. Unit engagement, as I mentioned earlier, that is another aspect of spiritual fitness. Embedded RSTs. How many here are familiar with True North? How many are familiar with OST? How many are familiar with Ghost? How many are familiar with Grit? How many are familiar with ART? How many are familiar with ORM? I can probably go on with about 5 more, but I'm going to stop there. I just say embedded RSTs. There is also conversation going on about regarding spiritual fitness is embedded RSTs and local HC teams being diverted and not talking to each other. We're all on the same team, and when bullets start flying, we're all going to be looking to each other, not away from each other. So we're working with A1Z because there's some language that they have been updating to clarify that more in line with the medical community, where if you're on an HC team, it makes no difference if it's embedded or not. We're all on the same team, and we need to learn to work together. So embedded RSTs, that's part of spiritual fitness. Integrated resilience, and the list goes on with this. So spiritual fitness is a huge way ahead. That is the two ways in which we can fortify the warfighter and family. Next slide.
Okay, one more, because the arrow just showed up. That was awesome.
So,
Seeing if y'all are paying attention to the graphics. Next slide,
so
please.
next slide, and Chief, take
Okay.
us.
Oh, should you click ahead? Does another arrow show up? All right. Well, anyways, so as we're talking through this, again, we want you to listen for the description. We're not prescribing, we're describing how we care. And so as we look at line of effort 2 and re-imaging the Chaplain Corps culture, as I was coming into the seat, I was like, Chaplain Kitchens, like we have to talk about this verb of re-image. Like I don't understand it. Are we just talking about putting on a mask, and that could be very superficial, and I think our Corps is going to see right through that. And he's like, oh, Chief, like let's talk about when you re-image your computer. And I don't know about, like, there was a lot of hands about, if you've heard about the various embedded RSTs, but how many people have had computer issues? Okay, I mean, COM is always on, and I love them, and they help every day, but like we recognize that there's all kinds of spam and malware and viruses and people that are attacking. We're at war right now in the cyber domain, right? And so all of that can erode the ability of our computers to function as they were intended to. And so whenever you take your laptop, thanks to COVID, we're all carrying laptops so we can telework, right? Whenever you take that in and say, hey, it's not working well, they go, what? You know what? It might need to be re-imaged. And what happens when you re-image a laptop? Well, they take it back to standards. So can we get behind taking back the Chaplain Corps to standards of our core values, of integrity, of service, of excellence, of freedom, faith, and ministry? And how do we do that? We do that by building healthy teams, caring about one another, not just caring about the people outside of the chapel, but caring for the people inside of the chapel. Because when we say caring for airmen, family, and guardians more than anyone thinks possible, I'm pretty doggone sure that everybody in here is an airman, a guardian, or a family member, right? Like, you are included in that statement. So how do we build healthy teams? How do we onboard? How do we offboard? Like, here I am thriving through year 1, right? When we were here last year, I was getting my household goods delivered on day 1. So, like, modeling that it's okay to take a knee and say, I got to take care of my family for a little bit. I need to take care of my health for a little bit. And having the team be able to pick that up and care for you, and offboarding in the right way. We got work to do in that department, probably all of us, but we recognize that too within the air staff. There's always another wave of something going on the air staff, and I think it's great if you like to surf. But if you're not a very good surfer or a very good swimmer, you're getting hit with every wave. And so we are working on this as well, on how do we ensure that our members are able to offboard. Deliberate development and equal opportunities, dignity and respect for all, and Chaplain Kitchens talked about that professionalism with the personal touch a little bit earlier. So I went through those quickly, intentionally, because I want to expand on how do you do that, right? It's about creating the psychological safety, the psychological meaning, and the capacity, and recognizing that in our teams. Are our teammates able to still connect to the meaning of why they're in the chaplain corps? It's a calling, right? But how faint is the calling? Can you still hear the call? Chaplains, religious affairs airmen, you all, 99.9% of you said, I came in because I wanted to help somebody. And can you still connect to that like you did when you were fighting to get into the chaplain corps? If not, why not? And how do we reconnect you? Psychological safety. Are you creating the space for the people on your team to belong and be uniquely them? It's not one or the other. It has to be both to have true inclusion. And then psychological capacity. Do you recognize that the members on your team have the ability to have that deliberate development and focus on the mission? I am grateful that our teammates entrust us with some of the hardest things that they're facing. Sick kids, sick spouses, lost parents, failed marriages. It breaks my heart, the things that our people are going through, and at the same time, trying the best that they can to get the mission done. And so sometimes our people aren't at a place where they have the capacity to take on more, and yet we still give them more. And so are we creating the space to have the conversations and say, hey, you were a little short with how you responded right here. That's off for you. Like, what's going on? Let's lean in. Let's see what's going on. And so that's getting back to the standards of saying, I care about the person next to me just as much as I care about the people outside of the chapel. Next slide, please.
So LOE number 3, rebuilding HC readiness. 2 years ago at the summit, we spent the summit. There were working groups leading up to it, and they broke out into 3 groups. One group was policy, how to align our policy top to bottom. Second was HC training, a lot of work in the area of training at all levels, all service components that were unified. And number 3, HC cares, caring before, during, and after. So we've spent a lot of time talking about rebuilding HC readiness. And where are we? Well, we have worked through a lot of the readiness shift that has transpired. You heard General Brown talking about AFORGEN. Do we really need it? Yes, we do. It's how we present forces. So we may be looking through our HC lens and say, I don't see where it's any better. It looks about the same to me. However, the way that I'll say the component commands receive the forces being presented, it looks differently. It does look differently. In fact, we'll hear more about this Thursday morning. We have a short presentation on an update on AFORGEN that will go into a little more detail. The reason this is important is our chaplain corps needs to be ready tomorrow for the fight today. So we're in the process now of building a Train the Trainer course at the Expeditionary Center. We're on the leading edge of this so that every readiness RST at every installation can be trained in this Train the Trainer course. In other words, how to engage the IG, how to put scenarios together, how to train the staff. And we're really concerned about our functional lane. We're not concerned about self-aid buddy care, all the airman pieces. We're more concerned about functionally what are the skills that we do so that when we get into a scenario, we already have the muscle memory to apply it in that situation. So that is why the training and organization of these RSTs is going to be very important as we move forward. So we have 6-month, 1 year, 18-month, 24-month gates that we're working through to accomplish this. So at the end of the day, these 3 LOEs all work together in preparing our Corps to prepare our people to be ready for tomorrow's fight today. So, and you notice we said all service components. Early on, we brought the Guard and Reserve to the table with us. So I'm going to put the Guard and Reserve in the hot seat for a minute. As we're going through, did we or did we not look at the Guard and the Reserve and say, will this work for the Guard? Will this work for the Reserve?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And it was the answer that, yes, it's going to work.
Yes.
So, and if there's a point where it doesn't, do we circle back and we discuss it and address how we can get there?
Yes.
I think
Now-
the key word is requirements, right? Okay.
So, because of that, a requirement for every Chaplain Corps member is going to be trained in assist, not assist T for T, trained in assist, and trained in SISM.
Well, sir, I was trained in assist at the apprentice course. Am I good?
Well, Chief, I think the question is, can you execute those skills?
Not as well as I could when I went through the training right away.
So then I guess you're self-admitting that you're not ready.
I know. I'm afraid that maybe I'm the only one that's not ready.
So the bottom line is, as we go forward, we hear that there are fewer mental health providers on the outside and inside. We are going to be placed in our Chaplain Corps is going to be placed in situations where mental health will not be there.
Absolutely.
And if I cannot, one thing that keeps me awake at night is our people not prepared for the crisis. So critical incident stress management, TSR, traumatic stress response, is what we had shifted to as an Air Force. We're going to go back and ensure everyone is SISM trained, because external to the Air Force, SISM is a standard model of debriefing. If our people are placed in front of a group, we want to give them tried and true skills that they will be able to lead a group through following a crisis, or if they're in front of an individual who is suicidal, that you can walk with them with a plan and a response. So these 2 programs are tried and true, so that is where we're going to move forward. So the Guard and Reserve needed to hear that was a requirement so that they now can palm for this as a readiness requirement. So historically, we have been all over the map on what we're going to do. We're trying to say this is the way forward, and we're trying to look over the next 5 years of how to prepare the Corps to be ready for tomorrow's fight today. So that's a little bit of the background on LOE number 3. So if we move forward, so let me just walk through a couple of spiritual fitness slides. Chief and I will go back and forth on this. Next slide. Let me just spend a moment on this. You can build, I think it's one more click. So when it comes to spiritual fitness, if you think of the Venn diagram where you have spiritual in blue and you have religion in red, This resonates. In fact, this has been presented to all of the new commanders and command chiefs. They've seen this. It resonates with them because they're individuals that they understand they have a spiritual domain, but they have no religion. So that red sphere, it is off the chart. You don't even see it. There are others, you probably can name 2 or 3, that their religious sphere and their spiritual sphere are superimposed on top of another. You can't tell the difference. For many people, there is an overlap and an offset. So spirituality, where you find meaning, feel connected, how should I live? And then on religion, the practices, rites, and rituals, what is right and wrong and true and false. That overlap is the belief, comfort, reflection, ethics, and awe of spirituality and religion. So religion being that set of beliefs and practices, spirituality is a state of mind. Commanders say, Chaplain, I've never heard it explained this clearly. This is exactly what we're looking for. So this one example is a great way to explain how we do both and not either or. That's why spiritual fitness is important now and is going to be important going forward. Next slide. Next slide.
Okay, so this slide, and it might be a little hard to see if you're toward the back, but this is health.mil. And so this is the official website for our military health system. And if you look on the left-hand side as they talk about total force fitness and what our medical providers are saying contributes to that, there's spiritual fitness right there. And so this is, we're able to see this. We're able to see the suicide prevention and spiritual fitness, how that plays a role. And I think our medics have got this, from the beginning. When you go in and you receive care, you're asked very quickly if there are any religious accommodation needs to be provided for. So in addition to an accommodation request on a healthcare system, they see right away the connection to spiritual fitness and the holistic health of an airman, a guardian, or a family member. Next slide. Oh, okay, and again. One more, please. So right here, I know we're not unfamiliar with the comprehensive airman fitness pillars. When you go over and you look at the spiritual side, there is the current definition listed, the ability to adhere to beliefs, principles, values, and to persevere and prevail in accomplishing the mission. And down below, which I think really resonates with that sphere of spirituality, if we're trying to make sure that we can walk alongside every airman, guardian, and family member, is that connection to our core values, perseverance, perspective, and purpose in life. Everybody is seeking that connection to purpose, and that is right in our pillar. Next slide, please. Can you build that one out? Great. So this definition right here is what is projected. This is what we are putting into our new policy. So slight modification, but the ability to adhere to beliefs, virtues, values needed to develop a fulfilling life and quality of service. And what is represented here in the pictures is how that might show up for any given member that we're coming alongside and serving. Is it persevering over a challenge? Is it the connections? Is it that awe in that space? Is it the celebrations in the community and bringing faith into a promotion celebration? I would be doing a lot of prayer in those push-ups in the water, I'm just saying. And so this is how this shows up in everyday life for our airmen. Next slide.
All right, one more build. There we go. So I love presenting next to the Surgeon General when we're doing this. I say, well, this is the brain slide, and I'm going to do this on behalf of the Surgeon General. And the Surgeon General says, yes, Chaplain, go right ahead. This is based on one study. This is the 2018 Yale University, Columbia University cerebral cortex journal. And this is just one. There is tons of empirical data supporting this, but this is the foundation. If you look at the left inferior parental lobe, which is in the back part of the brain, that's the home of spirituality. But really the emphasis from the study is on the prefrontal cortex at the front of the brain, where it is the thickening of that cortex takes place through regular practice of faith and spirituality. And the thinning takes place with decreased discipline in faith and spirituality. And it brings more chronic depression. So the thicker the prefrontal cortex, the less chronic depression. The thinning brings more chronic depression. So that's all based on the practice of faith and spirituality. What a great foundation that this has into spirituality in the life of our people. This is the other aha moment for many of the commanders and command chiefs, because this resonated with them also, of what it is that we can do as a chaplain corps in helping our people going forward. Next slide. So in a very simplistic nutshell, hope and meaning is what we ask for. We hope that our folks embrace, and that is through purpose and connection to bring to wellness and thriving. Next slide.
All right. If you haven't seen this already, this is the spectrum of resilience, and we have the unique opportunity as Chaplain Corps members to serve as a bridge to care in every single one of these. So I don't know how many people get to say, I got them all, bingo, but like this really is where we get to go in and say, all right, we help with ensuring that there's resilience for self and creating opportunities for a member to practice their faith. And then we create deliberate connections and opportunities to have spouse events, family events, single airman and guardian events where they're able to connect with family and friends, and we fortify that relationship. We have our religious groups within the peer and social. We actually listed in the support entities, and then we have that great responsibility and opportunity to go in and care for our healthcare providers as only we can. And so this is an opportunity for us to really lay in and say, hey, like, we've got the spectrum of resilience, and we are uniquely qualified to connect at every level to ensure that we're inspiring readiness. Next slide.
I'll leave you with this slide. The bottom line to this is, in this pyramid of life, the base and foundation is based on transcendence. It's belief, hope, connection to the sacred or significant. And from that, it's how we measure and adjust our attitude, our rest and nutrition, our exercise and health, and our support network, so that we can be at the best in our game when it comes to control and problem solving. I actually would give blank copies to the commanders and command chiefs, and the spouse has got 2 copies. The reason they got 2 copies is when the principal lost theirs, they would have a backup. And they were given a blank copy so that they could adjust that and use that as a reference point to go back to. But this is really a reminder of the important role we as a Chaplain Corps play in the hearts and lives of our people. Next slide. That really, in a nutshell, gives you the big backdrop of HC Next 2.0 and the important role each and every one of us play. And with that, I believe we go over to questions. And our moderator, facilitator, and fearless leader, Chaplain Gaither, is here to lead us.
Chaplain Gaither.
Thank you to both of you for laying out the LOEs. I'm Chaplain Julian Gaither, Command Chaplain Global Strike, and we have a...
All right. Striker Nation in the house.
As a reminder, the questions, you can go either on the app or the QR code that was on the screen earlier to ask your questions. But we'll begin with two questions. One of them has to do with our training. We're training and equipping our religious affairs airmen to be multi-capable and force multipliers. What additional trainings would you recommend not only our religious affairs airmen, but also our chaplains to receive to ensure that we're fortifying for warfighter readiness?
It's a great question. Let me go part one and you go part two.
Yes, sir.
Because part one, I'm going to jump on exactly what Chief Bass said, because General Brown has said the same thing. When we start identifying and listing all of this extra training that we need to do to be multi-capable airmen, we are actually going to hamstring us into doing more, and we're really not going to be as agile as we need to be. I mean, Chief Bass said it eloquently. General Brown has said it a different way. Sometimes it is in the moment. I will say that the Surgeon General has already approached me and say, you know, the Chaplain Corps and SG, we work so similarly and closely together. Maybe we ought to look at joining forces to be multi-capable airmen. So the beware is that when we go into formal agreements like this, we're also going to be offering up borrowed manpower. That, oh, you're a multi-capable airman. Now, we need you over here for this, pulling you from your primary. That's not the original intent. The original intent was your primary is your primary. When you've completed your primary, then you can do your secondary. I'll leave you with point B and then over to Chief. Point B is, I believe what we already do, we're multi-capable airmen. How many of us work on our computers? How many of us do our own finance? How many of us go in and do our own personnel actions? Just stop and think of everything that has been decentralized, and you now become the expert that you go online and you do all these things yourself. I think we've become a multi-capable airman in addition to our regular JOB. And I realize the entire force is doing that. So we have been, and Chief and I talk this on a recurring basis. We have been uber cautious not to oversell the Chaplain Corps to be used in a borrowed manpower state, but instead to have multi-capable abilities that when you have extra time, in other words, you're not doing your primary mission at the moment, you can actually be doing this at the same time.
So I'd like to answer the question in a couple parts. So for my split personalities, I'll take it. So if I look at it from the lens of sitting in and being able to be a part of some of the multi-capable airmen discussion from the logistics lens, A4 team that's leading that, what they would want message to you when it comes to multi-capable airmen is they would say, it's about your ability to survive. Right, like if you are thinking about the right mindset of being on a small team, of having mission command, of being disconnected, are you able to do the things that you're going to be able to survive and not be like, hey, cool, that's not my job, I'm not going to do it. Like, no, like they would want you to have that understanding that it's about surviving. I will echo what the boss said in and around just ensuring that we're not saying, hey, we're up for grabs, you can use us for anything and everything except for our actual functionality. We bring a unique skill set that no one else has. And when we don't perform in that, there is a void and an absence there. And particularly when we're talking about the chances to have the mass casualties that could occur, it's about last rites. It's about seeing the expectant first. And we need to be in that headspace too. I'm gonna take off the SEA hat and put on the career field manager hat. And I will say, when we think about multi-capable airmen, we're working with fellow career field managers and seeing where are the airmanship occupational foundational competencies versus occupational competencies. Where are there commonalities between every AFSC that we ensure that we're growing these skill sets, because we're all airmen. And so we're being intentional about working those pieces. Where we're looking at it from an occupational competency mindset is that there are things that make sense for us, like honor guard, like funeral support with casualty affairs. And so if we can grab modules from their CDCs or from their training, and we have it available so that we can brush up on those skills, or hey, we're in a unique mission where this makes even more sense for us to have, like, let's be intentional about that. But that's after we are ensuring that we have our skill set locked in. Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Whoever that was great.
Second question is, do you believe that spiritual fitness as one of our core capabilities will help HC in owning that part of CAF?
Yes. Yes, I believe it does, because there was a time in history when this domain was up for ownership or championship, and the Chaplain Corps stepped back from being the champion for the spiritual domain. It is now time that we reclaim that domain, which is where we're moving forward. And that's why I said yes.
I know tomorrow we will talk about hope, but one of the questions has to do with the strategic framework, because it was mentioned earlier that at the strategic level, we don't want to dictate to wings how to operate. How then are you framing the HOPE program so it does not dictate operation at the tactical level?
Okay, let me see if I understand the question. So if a framework is being presented on a capability that your commander, as soon as they hear about it, they're going to ask you to implement. Read the question one more time.
How will HC, half HC, not dictate hope at the tactical level?
Okay, Chief, go for it.
Thank you, sir. We kid about who gets the harder questions. So,
Chief.
yeah.
Chief gets the hard questions.
All right, so when it comes to operationalizing, and I got that word out right, which I usually struggle with,
Good job.
the White Rope program, from a strategic level, our senior leaders are asking us, why are we walking away from a deliberate investment in a training environment, whether that's at tech training or the Air Force Academy or the prep school, and where we said, hey, it's critically important that you connect to your spiritual fitness, that you help others, that people, when they see the white rope, they say that's a peer among peers in modeling spiritual fitness, and they can point me in the direction to get care. They don't replace a chaplain, they don't replace a religious affairs airman, but they are a sensor in the unit, and we say, congratulations, you've graduated from this training environment, you no longer need any spiritual fitness, you got this. Why would we do that? Why would we walk away? And so what we have done as a team, and we'll expand on this more with the launch, is that we have looked at grassroots initiatives. We have listened to what our senior leaders are saying. We see this on the road. Why is this here and not everywhere? How come it exists and it can exist in deployed locations and it can exist overseas and it's in ISR and is it connected? Do you know that this is happening? How do we make sure that there is uniformity and standardization in an initiative like this, and so that it is not a program? We're very intentional about saying it's a spiritual fitness initiative. It is a way of life. A program can live and die and on a shelf and could be something that is PCS vulnerable. The person that really championed this left, and so yeah, we don't care about it. And I will go back to speak to my AETC days, if you'll permit me. And when we would call from Air Education and Training Command and say, hey, we have a graduated white rope coming to your base. Employ this awesome volunteer who can't wait to help. And oh, by the way, when we looked at that brain slide and it showed where spirituality lives and it was red, you know when it grows and is the most red when they're doing those scans? Is when a person is recalling doing an act of service and helping their fellow man. And we're creating opportunities for that, and we've got one for you. Are you ready to receive them? And the bases, for the most part, would say, what are you talking about? Is it a chaplain? Is it a religious affairs airman? We're like, no, this is a great trained volunteer. They're ready for you. I don't know what to do with that. Click. And that's it. And so when we look at it from what can we do to build a framework, it's how do we shape the policy to help the team so that it doesn't just live in an Air Education and Training or a USAFA location or these grassroots programs that are crushing it, that it can go everywhere. And so we've layered in the foundations for it to be supported in every location. Now, the policy will say you may have this initiative at your location, but I will say in some way, shape, or form, we have to all be in. And we're intentional about having our total force involved in this, Guard, Reserve, RegAF, to say, when you graduate from tech training and you had exposure to being a white rope, they could go anywhere. And you're gonna have to have an answer on what you're gonna do with this individual that says, I wanna help and I wanna connect. I hope that helps answer that question, sir.
I'll just add one point.
Yes, sir.
So, and the policy will say may, so it's not a requirement. But I will say this, you'll need to take it up with your commander because your commander gets a vote in the ministry that takes place at your installation. And commanders are already talking, and commanders are already asking, when can we get that? So just realize that, look at it as a force multiplier, not a force reducer. In other words, we're not telling you that 20% of your manpower is going to be cut. We're telling you how you can grow manpower without growing any numbers on your books, but you're growing a capability. So I would just say, be open-minded about it. It's not dictating down, it is creating opportunity.
Thank you. We got time for one more question. So one of the questions is a policy several years ago regarding retirees. What is the current vector for programming and worship services with 90% of the parishioners being retirees or non-Title X attendees? Ultimately, do we have the backing to cancel them?
Can I start this one?
Let me just begin that the commander is part of this process. So when you start talking policy, commanders have a very active voice because they own the resources and the responsibility. So let's not forget the commander's role within that. Remember that the Title X responsibility, who is covered under Title X, and that's where your emphasis wants to be. I have heard of a service, a particular service that was shut down and was not going to be opened back up until the commander got involved. When the commander got involved, suddenly there were all of these active duty individuals present. And they did have a service, but it looked differently than it did before. So there are methods and models there. I've seen plenty of crosstalk, both on social media and other forums. So there's plenty of folks talking there. So I would say reach out. Thanks.
So I've shared before, and I know there's some new faces in the room. We're a product of some of our experiences, right? That doesn't shape everything that we are, but I started out at a Reg-AF unit attached to a reserve base. And so all I knew growing up was total force integration. Our reserve members were activated very quickly after I showed up and served right alongside them, multiple deployments following September 11th. I don't know any different from that life because of that experience. And as I entered into the Chaplain Corps, I went to Luke Air Force Base, which I would say from where I have been is a little unrivaled, but take up the challenge, please, on how they employ their retirees. And I look at it from an opportunity to build allies and partnerships with members that for some reason continue to be an airman for life and love being a part of that community. And so how do you foster that relationship so that we can be better prepared to care for our Title X requirements? Because some piece of them wants to be involved in this. It's just, are we empowering them and advising them of where we have the most critical need? And so I'll brag on Luke in the sense that their retirees are working the flight line feast. Their retirees are providing the meals and spending time with the airmen in the dorms. They are a part of the parish, but they are not the only thing that happens there. And so I don't know any different from having had the opportunity of having that experience than to look at a retiree and say, you are another force multiplier. And how do I vector you and engage you in a way that allows us to care for our community? So I would just put that challenge out. If there is this struggle, reach out and hear how other people are employing our retirees to do amazing things.